Join the conversation.
Join the conversation.
You're with CapeTalk.
It's Friday on CapeTalk, 4:25. This is when we review a book of the week. Now, I know John Matham has already had Jonny Steinberg in studio to talk about Winnie and Nelson, Portrait of a Marriage, his latest book. But I'm going to review it anyway and recommend seriously that you read this. If you don't know about Jonny Steinberg, I think you should. He's our best non-fiction writer. He's our best chronicler of the details of life in this country. He also writes an excellent column in Business Day. Midlands, remarkable book about a particular crime in the Midlands. The Number, a book that takes you inside the gangs in Polesmore Prison. Remarkable book. A Man of Good Hope, I think is best, one of the best books I've ever read. It puts you in the shoes of a refugee, someone who made their way from Somalia right across Africa to here in Cape Town, ended up in Blickersdorp, and then somehow got himself to America, and just follows the nitty-gritty of that story in a way that is so readable. I loved One Day in Bethlehem, his book about a particular court case in the Free State. Just loved it. All his books are forensic. He actually examines evidence. And what he does with Winnie and Nelson is he takes this marriage, these two lives, and explores the nexus between them. And all the time he's saying, this is what you think you know. This is what Nelson said happened. This is what Winnie said happened. But it couldn't have been that way because X, Y, and Z. And he's not criticizing them. He's not saying they're lying. He's pointing out the frailty of memory and the self-serving nature of memory. Winnie would remember different things because she wanted to make a different point at the moment in life she was talking. She was often angry with Mandela, and if she was angry, she'd have one perspective. What is great about this book, and Jacob Glamini sums it up so well in a shout on the book, it makes Winnie and Nelson both appear larger than life and all too human. This is a book that leaves no stone unturned. Nelson Mandela, in particular, does not come out of this book well in lots of ways. His treatment of women, his treatment of Winnie, his treatment of his children. But that's good because it makes him a real man in very, very difficult circumstances. I also deeply resent people who have a one-dimensional view of Winnie Mandela. Oh, she was a kidnapper, she was awful, she was this, she was that. Read this book. All of that's there. Yes, she was all of those things. And people have this narrative, oh, poor Nelson, Winnie was terrible. You'll have a different view when you read this book. All the frailties, all the difficulties, all the aggression of Winnie Mandela is laid out to be read, but in a proper context. You'll have a different view of both of them. You'll still consider them giants. And what needs to be remembered was how extraordinarily, almost explosively attractive these two people were. Nelson Mandela was a very handsome man. Over 6 foot, boxer, he ran, he was fit, he had a smile that lit up a room. He was a playboy, he was a womanizer, he was a magnet. The reason the ANC leadership, more experienced people like Sisulu, chose him was because of that extraordinary presence he had. And Winnie was the same. I only first met Winnie Mandela in 1987 in person, and still then she was a captivating presence physically and in terms of the persona she had. Remarkable. Together, goodness me, what an explosive couple. And this book magically tells their story. It's a great book. It's well worth reading. It's a little bit too long. It's well over 400 pages, but I think it's worth the journey. And here's how it finishes. Winnie was alone with Nelson when he died. She, in fact, appears to have spent a good deal of time with him towards the end of his life. As his dementia grew worse, he refused to eat, and in his addled state he would call for his former wife, and so Winnie came to feed him. Once, a little more than a year before Nelson's death, a friend bumped into Winnie on the streets of Mthatha, a short drive from Nelson's home in Qunu, and asked what she was doing so far from home. "It's this chief," she reported Winnie exclaiming. "He's been going on about me. First he decided to leave me, now he won't eat without me. I'm supposed to fly all this way to feed somebody." She appeared to delight in the whole business. It was apparently at Grasser Michel's insistence that Winnie was there while Nelson was dying. It was obvious to Grasser that Winnie must be a chief mourner, a friend of the family told this author. A good death must be the summation of a life, and Winnie had been Nelson's great love. 56 years and 10 months after their first date, Winnie and Nelson were alone together for the very last time. One of them was close to death and unconscious. The other was as lucid as ever, her own mortality closer than she might have thought. Within 5 years they were both gone. Their myths will remain, ever evolving over decades, perhaps over centuries, into what it would be too bold to say. This is a magnificent book. Winnie and Nelson, Portrait of a Marriage by Jonny Steinberg, published by Jonathan Ball Publishers. Well worth a read if you have any remote interest in the recent history of this country.